Welcome to the deep dive. Some headlines just really grab you, don't they? They showcase something extraordinary.
They really do.
Like just yesterday, this story. It sounds like something straight out of a movie, honestly. Surgeons in Russia performing a high-risk operation,
Right.
and then bam, an 8.8 magnitude earthquake hits.
It's just incredible, the composure, right? During something like that.
Unbelievable. That steady hand required, in that kind of chaos, it's almost unparalleled.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible testament to human professionalism, And also, frankly, the critical importance of emergency preparedness. This happened off the coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula. That's in Russia's Far East, a region that's, it's part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, so very geologically volatile.
Right. Earthquakes aren't exactly rare there.
Not at all. But despite these, powerful tremors interrupting surgery right there at a regional cancer clinic, the team just stayed completely composed, successfully completed the operation. Yeah, and tsunami alerts were even triggered across the Pacific, led to evacuations.
Yeah.
But thankfully, no casualties reported, largely due to, strong building standards and pretty effective early warning systems in that area.
The composure, though, that's what gets me. It's truly mind-boggling. What does an event like this tell us about, our capacity for professionalism under just extreme duress?
Oh, it speaks volumes. It really does. But the rigorous training, the mental fortitude that's inherent in these critical professions. These individuals, they are prepared for worst-case scenarios.
Right. And
their ability to just compartmentalize, to focus amidst utter chaos, that's really a hallmark of exceptional dedication. It kind of reminds us that, fundamental human skills like steady hands, clear thinking, they remain absolutely indispensable, even with all our amazing technological advancements.
Absolutely. And, that's exactly why you're here with us on the Deep Dive. We are your guides through this complex, sometimes pretty overwhelming information landscape. Our mission, really, is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, provide those surprising facts, like an earthquake hitting mid-surgery, and offer just enough humor, hopefully, to keep you engaged, all tailored to help you become well-informed quickly and thoroughly.
Indeed. And today's expedition, it's going to be a pretty sweeping journey. We're delving into cutting-edge science and technology, trying to unravel the intricate web of global geopolitics, feeling the pulse of the world economy, and of course, sharing some compelling human stories along the way.
Yeah.
We're basically here to help you explore what truly matters beneath those headlines.
Okay, let's unpack all of this then. We'll start by looking at some truly hidden worlds, both right here on Earth and much further beyond, Earth and beyond, unveiling hidden worlds and cosmic collaborations. All right, let's talk about something that sounds like it belongs in a fantasy novel, maybe, but it's actually right here on Earth. It's just incredibly good at playing hide and seek.
Jekyll's. That's a good way to put it.
We're talking about Zealandia, Earth's 8th continent, apparently, which has finally sort of emerged from the deep, literally. For the first time, it has been fully mapped. Can you tell us more about this geological marvel? What exactly is Zealandia?
Well, what's fascinating here is that, the concept of Zealandia, it's also known as Terua Maui in Maori, or Tasmantis. It's intrigued geologists for years.
Right. I feel like I've heard the name before.
Exactly. But it's only now, really, that we have a full, high-resolution mapping of the whole thing. And this isn't just, some random chunk of land floating around. It's massive.
Yeah.
A predominantly submerged piece of continental crust.
Okay.
Located mostly in Oceania, spanning roughly 4.9 million square kilometers.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, about 2/3 the size of Australia. So this full mapping, it really solidifies its status as Earth's hidden continent. It confirms its distinct continental characteristics, both the bits above water like New Zealand and New Caledonia and all the stuff below.
So it's not just a big island or a collection of islands. It's actually a continent. What makes it so significant geologically? Like, what specific features confirm that continental status? And how does this new mapping change our understanding of, Earth's dynamics?
Exactly like that. It's not just oceanic crust thickened up, it's proper continental crust. The mapping reveals its unique geology, things like active volcanic systems, very distinct rock types, and crucially, these deep sedimentary basins.
Sedimentary basins. Okay, what are those exactly?
Think of them like vast sort of bowl-shaped depressions in the Earth's crust.
Right.
And over millions and millions of years, layers of sediment, sand, mud, organic matter build up in these bowls. And those layers tell a story, a long-term story of geological stability and processes that you typically only see on continents. They're a classic signature of a true continental landmass.
Gotcha. So it's like reading geological history books trapped in rock.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this discovery offers incredibly valuable insights into how microcontinents evolve, their geological history. It challenges some of our older assumptions about how stable continents are, how they break apart and sink. For example, understanding how Zealandia formed and then mostly sank beneath the waves gives us new models, new ways to think about how other submerged continental fragments might have formed. Places like the Rockall Plateau off Ireland, or maybe parts of the Arctic.
Interesting.
So for you, the listener, this really means a more comprehensive understanding of Earth's dynamic geography. Continental drift, yeah, but also the complex ongoing processes that are still shaping our planet.
Yeah.
It truly is one of those aha moments, isn't it?
Yeah.
Realize that there's just more to Earth, even big parts, than we previously understood.
It is genuinely mind-bending to realize that even after centuries of exploration, mapping, satellites, we're still fundamentally charting our own planet.
Absolutely.
It really underscores how much remains undiscovered, even right beneath our feet, or beneath the waves in this case.
It really does. It challenges us to think about just how much we don't know.
And speaking of vast unexplored frontiers, let's dive even deeper now. Extraordinary images captured by a Chinese-led research team. They've revealed actual communities of strange and, well, extreme organisms, and they're thriving at depths exceeding 9 kilometers.
9 kilometers? That's over 5.5 miles down in the Northwest Pacific Ocean.
That's incredible pressure, and we're talking about life forms never seen before, right? In such deep, high-pressure, totally dark conditions. What's so groundbreaking about finding complex ecosystems down there? Didn't we kind of assume life couldn't really flourish like that?
That's exactly it. This is truly unprecedented territory. It pushes the boundaries of what we once assumed about the absolute limits of life on Earth. I mean, previous understandings, they suggested that, sure, microbial life, bacteria, archaea, they could exist down there.
Right, the tough little guys.
The really tough little guys. But complex, diverse ecosystems, thriving under such immense pressure, in total darkness, with very limited energy sources, that seemed unlikely. Yet these new images, they show vibrant, diverse communities of macroscopic organisms. We're talking bizarre deep-sea fish, giant amphipods, kind of like deep-sea shrimp on steroids, unique microbial mats covering the seafloor.
Wow. So not just microbes, but actual communities.
Exactly. Complex interactions. This challenges traditional biological theories about, well, the energetic requirements for complex life. It suggests that life is even more adaptable than we thought, finding ways to flourish in environments we once deemed completely inhospitable. And, this opens up really exciting possibilities for astrobiology, too.
How so?
Well, if life can thrive in these extreme conditions on Earth, maybe similar extreme environments on other planets or moons in our solar system, think of the subsurface oceans of Jupiter's moon, Europa, or Saturn's moon, Enceladus. Maybe they could potentially harbor complex life, too. It raises the probability, perhaps.
It's astounding, isn't it? Just imagining it. The immense pressure down there, the utter darkness. What does this tell us, about adaptation, about resilience? Not just for deep-sea creatures, but maybe for life in general. Or even for ourselves. It sparks a real sense of awe, I think. Wonder about the unexplored potential right here on our own planet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really encourages that kind of critical thinking, doesn't it? About how incredibly adaptable life can be and just how much more there is to learn about Earth's biodiversity. It's humbling, in a way.
Definitely humbling. Okay, so from the hidden depths of our oceans, let's pivot upwards to the vastness of space, where perhaps surprisingly, cooperation sometimes seems to shine brighter than some of the tensions we see down here on Earth.
That's a really interesting dynamic to watch, yes.
Yeah. We've seen some surprising continued prioritization of space collaboration between Russia and the United States, right? Despite all the broader geopolitical tensions. I mean, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov even highlighted it recently as a very positive factor. What's keeping this vital channel of dialogue open, do you think, even when other diplomatic avenues seem, well, strained?
Well, it's fascinating because space cooperation has this kind of historical precedent, doesn't it? It's often been a domain where dialogue persists, even during the Cold War, for example.
Right. Apollo Soyuz?
Exactly. It's often viewed as a realm sort of above the day-to-day political disputes, partly because of its inherent global nature, but also just the sheer cost and complexity of space exploration. Nobody can really do it all alone, effectively.
Right.
And a really significant recent event was the first face-to-face talk between the heads of the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos, and the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration. That's NASA, of course, in 8 years.
8 years, wow.
Yeah. The head of Roscosmos actually visited the U.S. for discussions with NASA officials. And the main focus was the future of the International Space Station, the ISS.
Okay, what came out of that?
Well, the talks included concrete plans to extend the ISS's operational life at least through 2028 and possibly even push it to 2030. And crucially, they discussed detailed considerations for its eventual safe deorbiting. Bringing something that big down safely requires immense coordination.
Absolutely. You can't just let it drop anywhere.
Definitely not. So this meeting, it really signifies an ongoing vital commitment from both nations to maintain this shared outpost in space and also to manage its end of life safely. It's a process that requires meticulous long-term coordination,
That is a powerful statement about collaboration, isn't it? Especially when tensions are so high elsewhere. And it's not just these long-standing partners working together. We're seeing new strategic alliances forming too, like the U.S.-India satellite launch of NISAR. Now, this is described as a first-of-its-kind satellite. What makes it so unique, and why is this particular partnership so significant for global observation?
NISAR is genuinely groundbreaking. It's a major joint venture built collaboratively by the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, and NASA. What makes it unique is its extraordinary capability. It's a hefty satellite, about 2,392 kilograms.
Okay.
And it uses this cutting-edge technology called synthetic aperture radar, or SAR.
SAR.
Yeah, synthetic aperture radar. You can almost think of it as like a form of superhuman vision for our planet.
Okay, I like that.
Because SAR can penetrate clouds. It can see in darkness. It works by bouncing radar signals off the Earth's surface and then meticulously analyzing the echoes that come back. And NISAR can do this with such precision that it can detect changes on the Earth's surface as small as a few millimeters.
Few millimeters from orbit.
Exactly. Tiny shifts in Earth's land, water, ice, anywhere on the planet, with unprecedented precision.
That's incredible. What are the implications of that kind of accuracy?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, for you, the listener, this translates into critical data for understanding and addressing some really pressing global issues. Things like climate change monitoring, ice sheet melt, sea level rise, changes in vegetation, natural disasters. It could potentially detect subtle land deformation before an earthquake or volcanic eruption, track ground subsidence, map floodwaters. Also tracking changes in agriculture, forests. It's absolutely vital for global environmental monitoring and disaster prediction and management, a real game changer.
So it's basically giving us an almost hyper-accurate health report for the entire planet, right? Visible even through clouds and at night. That's amazing. And it's not just international governments working together up there. NASA is also boosting innovation by collaborating more with commercial space companies. Isn't that right? That feels like a really logical next step for space exploration.
That's absolutely right. And NASA's formalized this through a unique program called the Announcement of Collaboration Opportunity, or ACO.
ACO.
This program is specifically designed to invite industry partners, private space companies, to collaborate directly with NASA. And here's a key kind of innovative aspect. Companies can utilize NASA's unparalleled expertise, its state-of-the-art facilities, its vast resources, but without direct financial exchanges.
Oh, interesting. So it's not like a standard contract.
Exactly. The aim is to accelerate technology development for both commercial and government purposes. It fosters this synergistic environment where NASA shares its knowledge and infrastructure, and the private sector brings its agility and often different approaches to innovation.
That sounds like a brilliant way to pool resources and expertise, doesn't it? Essentially creating a sort of public-private innovation hub for space tech. What kind of real-world impacts have we actually seen from this kind of program already?
Oh, there have been some really significant real-world impacts. Past successful collaborations, for example, they've led to advancements in lunar lander systems, absolutely crucial for the upcoming Artemis missions back to the moon.
Right.
Breakthroughs in cryogenic fluid transfer technologies that's essential for long-duration space travel, refueling spacecraft in orbit, stuff like that.
Okay.
We've also seen progress in autonomous spacecraft navigation solutions, making missions more independent, multi-purpose laser sensing systems for really detailed planetary mapping, and even the development of flexible lunar tires designed specifically to withstand the incredibly harsh lunar environment.
Wow, lunar tires. Toggles.
Yeah.
And So this really demonstrates how this synergy between government agencies like NASA and the private sector can lead to significant breakthroughs. It drives innovation for missions that might otherwise be too costly or maybe too complex for any single entity, public or private, to tackle alone. It's really about collective advancement, ensuring that these ambitious goals of space exploration benefit from the agility and innovation bubbling up in the commercial sector, the tech revolution, promises, perils, and personal data.
Okay, so moving from the cosmos right down to the core of our digital lives now. Let's talk about the rapidly evolving tech revolution. And specifically, we're seeing some pretty interesting shifts in the artificial intelligence or AI landscape, particularly with Meta's superintelligence strategy. Mark Zuckerberg recently indicated that Meta is unlikely to open source all of its most advanced AI models. Now, this feels like a significant shift, doesn't it, for a company that was, historically at least, championed open source AI. It is indeed. It's a major strategic pivot for Meta, no doubt about it. And this decision, fundamentally, it's about retaining proprietary control over its most cutting-edge AI technology. While Meta has been a leader in open sourcing many of its foundational AI models, Llama, for instance,
Right.
moving forward, it seems their most powerful, what they're terming superintelligence models, will likely remain closed, proprietary. And this aligns, with growing concerns across the industry and certainly among regulators around the potential risks and the security implications of just widely releasing such powerful AI systems to the public without really stringent controls.
Mm.
It really emphasizes Meta's commitment, or perhaps their desire, to safeguard what they deem their most valuable and potentially most impactful AI innovations.
So this raises some big questions, doesn't it? What does this mean for the whole open source movement in AI, which, many believe is crucial for fostering innovation and transparency, and maybe more importantly for us, the users, what are the broader societal implications if just a handful of these huge tech giants end up controlling these super intelligence models behind closed doors?
Yeah, it fundamentally shifts the power dynamics of technology development. That's the core issue. On one hand, you have advocates for this more closed approach arguing, look, it's a responsible move. You need to control potentially risky technologies, ensure more centralized safety protocols, prevent misuse by bad actors.
Okay, the safety
The
argument.
safety and security argument.
Yeah.
However, critics argue, well, this could stifle the very collaborative spirit that has driven so much of AI's incredibly rapid progress. It could potentially concentrate immense power and innovation in the hands of just a few tech giants.
Right.
For the listener, for you, this means grappling with these fundamental questions about whether access to these potentially transformative tools will be democratized or if it's going to be highly centralized. It could lead to what some call a black box scenario, where the inner workings of increasingly powerful AI systems are opaque, maybe even to regulators, let alone the public.
That's worrying.
It raises fundamental questions about accountability, about bias baked into the systems, and the potential for these systems to shape public discourse or even influence critical decisions in healthcare, finance, you name it, in ways that we maybe can't fully anticipate or audit.
It definitely feels like we're at a kind of crossroads with AI, doesn't it? Grappling with both its incredible potential and its inherent risks. And speaking of data and control, let's shift to how big tech is increasingly collaborating with government, particularly on sensitive personal information. The Trump administration has partnered with major tech companies, Apple, Google, OpenAI among them, to launch a new private health tracking system. What are the key objectives of this ambitious partnership, and how does it aim to improve healthcare accessibility?
Right. The primary objectives here seem to be twofold, and they're aimed at fundamentally reshaping how health information is managed, at least in the United States. First, they aim to create a more streamlined framework, making it easier for patients and healthcare providers to share health information securely.
Okay, getting rid of the fax machines, hopefully.
Chuckles, hopefully.
Yeah.
Moving away from those fragmented paper records, definitely. Developing common standards, secure pathways for data exchange. Second, they're looking at developing more personalized health and treatment data systems. This could potentially leverage AI to offer tailored health insights, maybe even treatment recommendations based on aggregated, anonymized data, perhaps.
Hmm.
The stated goal, officially, is to significantly improve Americans' access to their own medical records and enhance overall healthcare accessibility and delivery. They're prioritizing data sharing for efficiency and convenience, particularly mentioning older Americans and disabled Americans who often face real challenges navigating complex healthcare systems.
Okay, so on one hand, that sounds like it could genuinely revolutionize healthcare access and management. That's the huge promise, obviously. But then there's always the peril side of the coin, right?
Always.
For you, the listener, how does a so-called private health tracking system, largely managed by these tech giants, actually integrate with federal agencies? And what are the, frankly, immense privacy implications when we're talking about our most sensitive personal health information?
Yeah, this immediately raises significant questions, huge questions about data privacy, data security. While the intent, as stated, is to improve access and efficiency, the sheer volume of sensitive personal health information being managed by these major tech giants, even in collaboration with federal agencies, could create massive new vulnerabilities.
How would it work structurally, do we know?
The system would likely rely on some form of decentralized architecture, technically, meaning your data might reside with the individual tech company you use, or perhaps certified third-party data custodians. Federal agencies would then have regulated access, presumably for public health surveillance, research, or oversight purposes. But still, even if technically decentralized, it represents a massive concentration of incredibly sensitive personal data. It creates a huge honeypot for cyber attacks, obviously.
Right. And it raises fundamental concerns about who truly owns the data, how it can be used beyond primary care, the potential for secondary uses, maybe commercial uses, insurance profiling, who knows. It really is a double-edged sword. It could revolutionize health data management for the better, absolutely, or it could centralize far too much power and control over incredibly sensitive personal information, creating a significant point of vulnerability for potential breaches, misuse, or even just mission creep over time.
That's definitely something we need to keep a very, very close eye on. Okay, from health data, let's shift gears again to cybersecurity and geopolitics, where we're seeing nations increasingly drawing these kinds of lines in the digital sand. Russia's media and communications regulator, Roskomnadzor, has blocked the Internet Performance Measurement Tool speed test that's run by the US-based company Ookla. What's the justification they're giving for this, and what does it tell us about this ongoing battle for digital sovereignty? Right. Russia's stated reason for blocking speed tests boils down to identified threats to national digital security. They've explicitly expressed concerns that Ookla, the company behind speed test, could be sharing data gathered from Russian users, things like IP addresses, network performance metrics with U.S. intelligence agencies, which they believe increases the risk of cyber attacks on Russian networks and critical infrastructure. Russia is now officially recommending a homegrown alternative tool called ProSet. And this move, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It follows previous fines that were imposed on Ookla for violating Russia's data localization laws.
Oh, the laws requiring data to be stored locally.
Exactly. Requiring companies to store Russian citizens' data on servers physically located within Russia. So this situation, it really underscores these ongoing tensions surrounding digital sovereignty. Nations increasingly want to control their own internet infrastructure, their data flows, viewing them as critical national security assets. Especially in a context where cyberspace is, let's face it, increasingly weaponized in geopolitical conflicts, like the recent cyber attack on the Russian airline Aeroflot, which pro-Ukrainian hackers claimed responsibility for. It all ties together.
So it's really not just about checking your internet speed then, is it? It's about control, it's about trust, or lack thereof, and national security in this digital realm. And speaking of digital threats that feel increasingly sophisticated, there's this alarming story from the BBC about a new frontier in disinformation warfare. AI voice cloning being used in campaigns targeting British public sector workers. I mean, this technology is getting too good at impersonating people, isn't it? It's genuinely chilling to think about the possibilities.
It is. Truly chilling. The BBC reported that the identities, specifically the voices of British public sector workers, has been cloned using AI. And this was allegedly done by a Russian-linked disinformation campaign. Now, this isn't just, a simple deepfake audio clip. It involves creating incredibly realistic vocal imitations, good enough potentially to trick even colleagues or family members over the phone or in a voicemail.
Wow.
This poses a direct and immediate risk to personal information security. It makes sophisticated fraud, blackmail, or manipulation incredibly plausible. Imagine getting a call seemingly from your boss asking for sensitive information, or from a family member in distress asking for money.
Yeah, terrifying.
What's perhaps even more concerning for you, the listener, is the broader threat this poses to public trust and democratic processes. Advanced disinformation tactics like this. I mean, if you can no longer trust what you hear, even from voices you think you know, It fundamentally erodes the fabric of reliable information. It makes it so much harder to discern truth from fabrication in an already incredibly complex media landscape.
The thought of sophisticated AI being used to undermine trust at such a basic, fundamental level, yeah, that's deeply unsettling. And finally, just quickly on the tech and infrastructure front, there was that major air traffic control failure in the UK recently. Now, the technical issue itself apparently only lasted about 20 minutes.
Right, relatively brief.
But it caused this huge backlog of flights, widespread delays across the UK, impacting tens of thousands of travelers. Airlines are, quite understandably, demanding answers from NATS, the air traffic control provider. What does this incident highlight about maybe the fragility of our critical infrastructure?
Yeah, it starkly highlights just how critical infrastructure relies on these incredibly complex interconnected systems,
Yeah.
and how even a seemingly minor or brief glitch, 20 minutes, as you said, can have these widespread, costly, and cascading real-world impacts.
So what actually happened?
NATS explained it was a technical fault that prevented their system from automatically processing flight plans. This forced controllers to input flight data manually, which is obviously much, much slower.
Hugely slower.
Right. Which caused massive delays, hundreds of cancellations, not just in the UK, but spilling over into European airspace as well. It really underscores the inherent fragility, perhaps, of these highly dependent systems, and it stresses the absolute necessity for robust redundancy plans, rapid recovery mechanisms, and of course resilient cybersecurity measures to prevent these kinds of massive disruptions to daily life and global commerce. The seriousness is underlined by the fact that the UK Transport Secretary met directly with the NAT CEO almost immediately, highlighting the urgent need for accountability and, more importantly, preventative measures for the future.
Diplomacy, conflict, and humanitarian needs.
All right, let's shift our focus now to the global stage, and we have to start with the deeply concerning situation in Gaza. UN-backed global food security experts have issued an absolutely grave warning. They're saying that the worst-case scenario of famine is currently unfolding in Gaza, and the Hamas-run health ministry has reported 7 more deaths from malnutrition in just the last 24 hours. That brings the total toll of malnutrition deaths there to 154 since 2023. I mean, this is a truly dire humanitarian situation.
It is tragically dire. And hospitals in the besieged territory, they're recording an increasing number of deaths specifically from famine and malnutrition, particularly affecting children and the elderly, which underscores the sheer severity of the crisis. Compounding this, the aid actually entering Gaza remains far below required levels, despite the mounting needs, despite repeated international calls for increased access, for more border crossings to be open reliably.
And there have been reports of violence around aid distribution too, haven't there?
Yes, deeply disturbing reports from the ground. Al Jazeera stated that more than 70 aid seekers were killed by Israeli fire during one humanitarian aid distribution event. The BBC, separately, reported at least 30 killed by Israeli fire while waiting for aid. Israel, for its part, has stated they are investigating these specific incidents and claim at this point to be unaware of casualties resulting directly from their gunfire in these particular contexts. This whole situation just highlights the immense, almost insurmountable challenges of delivering aid effectively and safely in an active conflict zone, and the horrific humanitarian consequences for the civilian population trapped there.
It's just horrifying. And the conflicting reports really underscore the chaos and the difficulty of getting clear information from the ground. Adding to this incredibly complex and tragic situation, there was a hint from an Israeli minister about the possibility of annexing parts of Gaza, and even a proposal for Jewish resettlement by a far-right minister. What are the political implications of statements like that, especially during an already dire humanitarian crisis? And how does this impact any prospect for, say, a two-state solution down the line?
Well, it's kind of rhetoric. It adds immense complexity, and it further endangers the already incredibly fragile prospects of a two-state solution, which, is still widely considered by most of the international community to be the only viable long-term path to peace there. A proposal for annexation and Jewish resettlement directly contradicts that vision of a future Palestinian state. It could easily be seen as an attempt to permanently alter the demographic and political landscape of Gaza. Such statements coming from within the Israeli government, particularly from far-right elements, make any promises of aid, ceasefires, or a political horizon seem very distant indeed for Palestinians who are just struggling for daily survival. And these statements severely exacerbate political tensions both within the region and internationally.
But we should probably note Israel's perspective on aid efforts too, right?
Yeah,
For balance.
Absolutely. To provide a balanced view, it's important to note that an Israeli military official from COGAT, that's the Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories, they detailed what they described as an expansive Israeli humanitarian operation in Gaza. This was partly in response to those severe warnings from the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, the body warning about famine. So this highlights Israel's stated efforts and the humanitarian infrastructure they say they have in place aimed at addressing the crisis. It shows there are clearly different narratives and different approaches being described regarding the situation on the ground.
It's just a profoundly layered situation, isn't it? With absolutely no easy answers. And those differing perspectives really show how challenging any resolution is going to be.
Okay, now turning our attention to the Ukrainian conflict. Let's get some frontline updates. Russia's Ministry of Defense is claiming to have, quote, liberated Chasiv Yar. That's a pivotal Ukrainian stronghold in Ukraine's Donetsk region after months of really intense fighting. What's the strategic importance of this particular city, and what are the implications if its fall is confirmed?
Chasiv Yar is incredibly strategic for both sides in this conflict. It's a well-fortified position, sitting atop a hill, which gives it a dominant view and crucial firing positions over the surrounding areas.
High ground is key.
High ground is absolutely key in this kind of warfare. And critically, it's also served as a vital logistical hub in Ukraine's Donetsk region, a key supply route and command center for Ukrainian forces in that sector. Its fall, if confirmed by Ukraine and Kyiv, has not yet officially confirmed it, although Russian control seems evident through various independent sources and frontline reports.
It could potentially lead to a collapse, or at least a significant weakening, of Ukrainian defenses in nearby cities like Konstantinovka, Druzhkovka, and even Slavyansk further north. These cities form a really vital defensive line for Ukraine in the east. Hostilities around Chasiv Yar really intensified back in early April 2024. Initially, the rugged terrain there favored the Ukrainian defenders, but recent weeks have seen incredibly intense street fighting and just relentless Russian bombardment, leading to this significant development reported by Moscow.
But as that heavy fighting continues on the front lines, Russia has also launched these barrages of drones and missiles targeting Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. Reports say damage at over 24 locations. Ukrainian officials reporting 6 killed, an apartment block hit. It's grim. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., President Donald Trump has declared that Ukrainian refugees will be allowed to remain in the U.S. until the conflict ends. Can you give us some context on this decision, especially given some of the previous signals coming from his administration?
Certainly. It's estimated that roughly 240,000 Ukrainians have entered the U.S. since the conflict escalated back in 2022. Many came under a program called Uniting for Ukraine, or U4U, which offers temporary parole status.
Okay.
Now, after taking office, President Trump initially instructed his administration to begin the process of terminating all these categorical parole programs, including U4U. This, naturally, sparks significant fears among Ukrainians and advocacy groups that their protection could be revoked, potentially leading to deportation.
Right, a lot of uncertainty.
Huge uncertainty. However, after what was reported as a public confrontation, or at least a strong exchange, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where Zelensky voiced very strong concerns about this policy, Trump publicly reversed course. He affirmed that Ukrainians would indeed be permitted to remain in the U.S. until hostilities cease. Now, this U.S. stance, it kind of contrasts with Europe's situation, which is much more varied and, in some places, becoming stricter regarding Ukrainian refugees. There are ongoing debates across the European Union, or EU, about the long-term integration and costs associated with more than 4.3 million Ukrainians currently residing there, amidst rising social tensions in some member states.
Okay, shifting now to some internal issues within Ukraine itself. There are significant concerns being raised about Ukraine's mobilization drive. A report, this one cited from RT, indicates it's turned into a, quote, chaotic and violent process, with enlistment officers apparently using abusive tactics. A Ukrainian member of parliament, Georgy Mazarashu, even criticized it publicly as a shameful hunt for citizens. What exactly is this tactic being called busification, and what are the reported consequences for morale and maybe even the broader war effort?
Yeah, MP Mazarashu's criticism was quite stark. He described soldiers or potential recruits being treated like slaves, leading to widespread burnout, a significant lack of enthusiasm for service, which is obviously detrimental. Busification is the term being used, apparently, to describe the practice of forcibly packing potential recruits into minibuses, often through aggressive street apprehension tactics.
Wow.
This has reportedly resulted in instances of abuse, mistreatment, and tragically, according to these reports, even deaths during the process, perhaps due to harsh treatment or medical neglect during transit or initial detention.
That sounds awful.
It does. Now, while Kyiv initially denied the widespread nature of these issues, military officials have since acknowledged shortcomings within the mobilization process. They say they are striving to address them, recognizing the profoundly negative impact this has on national spirit, the economy, and ultimately the effectiveness of the military. It really highlights the immense pressure Ukraine is under to bolster its forces after years of war and the profound ethical and practical challenges of doing so in a sustained long-term conflict. It impacts everything from individual morale right up to the broader international perception of the war effort.
That's a truly grim picture of the human cost and the internal challenges they're facing. And in another internal struggle for Ukraine, the country's top anti-corruption prosecutor has accused President Zelensky himself of undermining independent anti-graft institutions, specifically naming the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, or SAPO, and the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, NABU. This reportedly led to a collapse in their functionality. What's the backstory here, and why are these institutions considered so critical for Ukraine, especially in the context of receiving massive international aid?
This is a really critical issue, yes. Critical for Ukraine's own democratic development, but also absolutely crucial for its relationship with international partners, particularly the European Union and the United States, who often explicitly condition financial and military aid on demonstrable anti-corruption reforms.
Right, it's always a key condition.
Always. The accusation from the prosecutor stems from recent political interference legislative changes, basically that reportedly placed SAPO and NABU under executive control, stripping them of their independent oversight functions, which were seen as vital. This move triggered mass protests within Ukraine, demanding their autonomy be restored. Whistleblowers, according to the prosecutor, have stopped cooperating with ongoing investigations because they fear leaks or reprisals, and anti-corruption investigators themselves now reportedly fear persecution.
So a chilling effect, basically.
A major chilling effect. Now, Zelensky has since introduced a bill intended to reverse that law and restore independence. But the prosecutor's public statement was stark. The damage is already done, implying a significant setback to institutional trust and operational functionality. This whole battle really highlights the immense challenges faced by genuine anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine, often fueled when investigations get close to high-profile cases involving powerful lawmakers or officials. And it underscores the importance of international pressure, frankly, in helping to maintain the independence of these vital institutions, ensuring aid isn't misused and the country can continue to develop democratically, even under the extreme duress of war.
It's just another incredibly complex layer for Ukraine right now, isn't it? Even amidst the existential fight against the invasion. Okay, let's pivot now to the ongoing push for Palestinian statehood. We're seeing a growing international chorus calling for recognition. 15 countries, including places like Andorra, Australia, Canada, Finland, France, Iceland, Ireland, Luxembourg, Malta, New Zealand, Norway, Portugal, San Marino, Slovenia, and Spain, have recently joined this push. What's the significance of this joint statement coming from such a diverse group of nations, many of them key Western allies?
Yeah, their foreign ministers issued a joint statement, and it specifically emphasized that a two-state solution is vital, in their view, to ending the current Gaza war. They called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, and they also highlighted the importance of unifying Gaza and the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority, signaling a desire for a single, cohesive Palestinian governance structure in the future. This move follows France's earlier commitment to recognize Palestinian statehood, potentially at the upcoming UN General Assembly. And with Canada now stating its intent alongside these others, it really aligns a significant bloc of Western countries. This growing push definitely reflects broader international support for Palestinian statehood. Something like 147 UN member states already recognize Palestine, including major non-Western powers like Russia and China. So this signals a potentially significant global diplomatic shift, or at least a strengthening momentum.
But Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, also seemed to set some key conditions for actually recognizing a Palestinian state. What were those conditions, and how do they align with maybe broader Western perspectives on this really thorny issue?
Right. Carney stated that Canada recognizing a Palestinian state would be contingent on Palestinian democratic reforms and, crucially, elections being held without Hamas participating or being in control. This stance aligns Canada pretty closely with positions articulated by France and the UK, essentially setting conditions for recognition. These conditions clearly reflect deep concerns among Western nations about security, about governance standards, and about ensuring that any future Palestinian state is democratic and, frankly, not controlled by groups that they deem hostile or terrorist organizations. It underscores the complexities and sensitivities surrounding the issue, as well as the desire for what they would see as a viable, peaceful partner in any future two-state solution.
And how is this growing international support, even with conditions, being received by the main opposition to immediate recognition, particularly the U.S. and Israel? What are the counterarguments being put forward?
Well, there's significant criticism coming from both the United States and Israel. Their longstanding position is generally that recognition should only come as a result of direct negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians, not through unilateral declarations by third parties.
Right. Negotiated final status.
Exactly. That's the traditional framework. And adding a very personal, emotional dimension, Emily Damari, who is a freed British-Israeli hostage, publicly criticized the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, stating that providing recognition to Palestinians now risks rewarding terror and that Starmer is not on the right side of history. This reflects very deep emotional trauma and legitimate security concerns among those directly impacted by Hamas's actions on October 7th, who view premature recognition as potentially legitimizing violence. And then on a more political and perhaps provocative level, at the Interparliamentary Union Conference recently held in Geneva, the Israeli Knesset speaker actually taunted European nations. He suggested Europe is becoming more similar to the Middle East and even provocatively proposed London or Paris as the site for a future Palestinian state.
Wow, that's pointed.
Very pointed. It highlights the deep divisions, the high tensions, and sometimes the frankly sarcastic or hostile rhetoric that's inherent in the political discourse surrounding this issue right now. It really is an incredibly intricate balance, isn't it, between political decisions, historical context, diplomatic pressure, immediate security implications. There's just no easy consensus in sight.
Tariffs, markets, and corporate shifts.
Okay, from those intense geopolitical maneuvers, let's try to navigate the economic currents now. Starting with the Federal Reserve's stance here in the U.S., they've decided to maintain the key interest rate unchanged. This is for the fifth consecutive meeting now. This decision came out of today's Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, meeting, and notably, it was made despite what's been described as pressure from President Trump for aggressive cuts. What does this decision tell us about the Fed's current approach and maybe the broader economic landscape, especially with the presidential election looming later this year?
Right, this decision really highlights a clear divergence, doesn't it, between the economic policy approach favored by the central bank and the desires expressed by some political figures. And it also reflects what's being called a divided Fed internally. Two governors actually dissented from the decision to hold rates steady, indicating there's some internal disagreement about the right path forward.
Interesting. So not unanimous.
Not unanimous. The Federal Reserve, or the Fed, is clearly prioritizing stability right now. They're carefully monitoring the potential impacts of various factors. President Trump's ongoing tariff policies are certainly one, but also persistent inflation concerns remain key. The implications for market stability and global trade are pretty significant because the Fed is trying to balance its dual mandate maximizing employment while maintaining price stability, all while navigating these external political pressures and the potential for economic disruption from unpredictable trade actions. It really signals a deliberate, watchful, and perhaps cautious stance. It indicates they're not being swayed, at least not yet, by immediate political demands, but are trying to focus on longer-term economic health.
So they're basically walking a very fine line, aren't they? Balancing that economic stability goal with these strong political headwinds. And speaking of President Trump's tariff policies, they're clearly reshaping global trade dynamics in real time. He's just imposed a significant 50% tariff on certain copper imports. This starts August 1st, citing national security reasons. Now, this specifically targets semi-finished copper products and copper-intensive derivatives, apparently excluding raw copper scrap. How is India, for example, responding to Trump's earlier imposition of a 25% tariff on their goods? What's the underlying tension there?
Well, New Delhi responded to President Trump's announcement of that 25% tariff on Indian goods by stating essentially that it would protect the interests of its farmers and businesses, while also continuing trade negotiations with the U.S. The Indian Ministry of Commerce emphasized the importance they place on fair and balanced trade agreements that benefit both parties. They took a similar public stance, actually, to how they approached a recently concluded free trade deal with the UK.
Okay, measured response.
Measured, yes. Now, Trump's decision to impose tariffs on Indian goods, according to the White House, stems from concerns over India's own historically high tariffs on certain U.S. products, but also, significantly, its ongoing trade relations with Russia. President Trump explicitly views India's membership in the BRICS economic bloc, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, as fundamentally anti-U.S.
Well, this adds another layer to the trade dynamics, doesn't it? It directly connects economic policy to broader geopolitical alignments and this perceived struggle for global influence.
It really does feel like a global chess match sometimes, with tariffs being used as pawns or maybe even more powerful pieces in a bigger geopolitical game. And what about Canada, our northern neighbor and traditionally very close ally? The impact of Trump's tariffs on Canada's manufacturing sector has reportedly led to, quote, feelings of big betrayal. Yeah. How severe are these impacts? And what does it reveal about just how interconnected North American supply chains actually are? Yeah, the White House's tariff deadline and the tariffs themselves have indeed caused widespread concern, even panic in some quarters. Across various sectors in Canada, steel, aluminum, automobiles, and now copper too. This really highlights the deep interconnectedness of U.S. and Canadian manufacturers and the profound risks these tariffs pose to those cross-border supply chains.
How so specifically?
Well, many Canadian companies supply critical components that go into U.S. finished goods. So tariffs on Canadian inputs can significantly increase costs for American businesses further down the line. While there have been reports of layoffs and production slowdowns in specific Canadian sectors directly hit by tariffs, there's also been some resilience noted in the overall employment sector, perhaps due to diversified manufacturing. However, experts in Canada and the U.S. are emphasizing the critical need for exemptions, particularly for North American-made parts integrated into supply chains, to mitigate the long-term damage. Because right now, the tariffs are creating significant uncertainty, a real sense of unease within industries on both sides of the border, and fostering this resentment among an otherwise very close ally.
That sounds incredibly disruptive, especially for what should be, and usually is, a strong North American economic partnership. And President Trump isn't just targeting Canada and India. He's also issued an executive order imposing what's being called a crippling 50% tariff on all goods from Brazil, effective August 1st. What's the stated rationale for this incredibly aggressive move, and how has Brazil reacted?
The rationale cited for this crippling tariff is exceptionally broad. It mentions alleged threats to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. But unusually, the executive order explicitly accuses Brazil of serious human rights abuses, and it specifically cites the alleged political persecution of Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, who is currently facing trial in Brazil over alleged coup plotting following his election loss.
Wow, that's very direct political linkage.
It's extremely direct. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has, unsurprisingly, strongly criticized the measure. He stated that President Trump was not elected to be the emperor of the world, and he vowed that Brazil would respond to protect its economic interests. This move seems to be part of President Trump's broader stance targeting the BRICS nations specifically, which, as mentioned, he accuses of actively undermining the global standard of the U.S. dollar and challenging American economic supremacy. It's a very assertive, even aggressive, use of economic leverage tied directly to political grievances and represents a significant escalation in these global trade dynamics.
It definitely feels like a significant escalation using these powerful economic tools for very specific political ends. But all right, on a potentially more positive note in the trade world, the U.S. has finalized a trade deal with South Korea. This sets a 15% tariff on South Korean goods. What are the benefits of this particular agreement for both sides, and how does it maybe contrast with all the other tariff news we've just discussed?
Yeah, this deal brings a welcome sense of certainty and mutual benefit, standing in pretty stark contrast to the heightened tensions we're seeing with some other nations. The agreement includes significant commitments from South Korea for investments in the U.S. and purchases of American liquefied natural gas, or LNG, and other energy products.
Okay.
In return, South Korea will open up its trade further to American products like cars, trucks, and agricultural goods, reducing some previous barriers. This agreement effectively eliminates the uncertainty of potentially much higher tariffs that could have applied if no deal was reached by that August 1st deadline. And it has already reportedly boosted South Korea's stock market. So it's being framed as a clear win-win, showing that not all trade negotiations have to lead to increased tensions, and that strategic alliances can actually be solidified through mutually beneficial economic agreements. This deal represents a positive outcome, seemingly, of focused negotiation, emphasizing economic partnership rather than purely punitive measures.
That's a good contrast to highlight, yeah. Showing the varied outcomes possible with trade policy. And these policies, positive or negative, they have very real-world corporate impacts, don't they? Ford, the auto giant, for instance, indicated that President Trump's overall tariff strategy is expected to cost the company about $2 billion this year alone. I mean, that's a huge hit to their bottom line, isn't it?
It's a very tangible and incredibly significant financial burden on a major American corporation. This $2 billion figure, it provides a really concrete example of how these broad trade policies translate into direct, immediate costs for domestic industries. And those costs can potentially affect everything: their profitability, their investments in new technologies like EVs, their production capacities, maybe even employment levels, and ultimately, potentially, the prices consumers pay for their products. It really underscores the complex, often unpredictable ripple effects of tariff implementation, even for companies operating primarily within the U.S. but relying on global supply chains.
And looking across the Atlantic, there are also these concerns being raised that a potential new U.S. trade deal with the European Union could inadvertently, quote, lock the EU into fossil fuel dependency. What's sparking these debates over energy policies and sustainability efforts, especially as Europe is trying so hard to push towards climate neutrality?
Well, critics are arguing that the potential terms of such an agreement may be terms that favor easier access for U.S. fossil fuel exports like LNG, or perhaps terms that discourage investments in renewable energy infrastructure if they're seen as potential trade barriers, that these terms might inadvertently hinder the EU's progress toward its own ambitious renewable energy and climate goals. This has sparked intense debates among environmental groups, European policymakers, and industry players. It highlights this complex, often difficult balance between immediate economic interests, short-term energy security needs, and those crucial long-term environmental commitments that the EU has made. It's a critical point of friction, really, because what might be seen as good for immediate trade or good for diversifying energy away from Russia might conflict directly with the EU's larger, legally binding sustainability objectives.
It really is a constant balancing act, isn't it, between economics, geopolitics, and environmental responsibility. But despite all these trade wars and tariffs and complexities, the U.S. economy itself actually showed surprising strength in the second quarter, growing at a 3% annual pace. That actually exceeded expectations. That seems like some impressive resilience.
It certainly is on the face of it. That 3% growth rate in the second quarter, it did exceed many analysts' expectations. It indicates that despite the various headwinds we've discussed, inflation, still relatively high interest rates, the global economic challenges posed by trade wars and tariffs, the U.S. economy has demonstrated a notable degree of resilience and underlying strength, at least in that period. This suggests a capacity perhaps to absorb some shocks and continue expanding, although, of course, the longer-term impacts of these trade policies and global instability will remain a key factor to watch very closely. Okay, let's quickly touch on market performance and some specific business earnings. Take Meta's Q2 earnings report, for instance. Their stock surged, 10–12% after hours trading due to strong results. What's driving that surge? And what does it tell us about the current tech investment landscape, especially around AI?
Right, Meta reported exceeding revenue expectations, and they largely attributed their success to increased social engagement across their platforms, Facebook, Instagram, driven by their ongoing significant investments in AI. This indicates that their strategy to infuse AI pretty much everywhere is resonating with users, keeping them engaged, and also with advertisers who are willing to pay for that engagement. The market clearly responded very positively to their overall performance, leading to a record high in their stock value. Now, interestingly, they also indicated rising costs related specifically to attracting and retaining top AI talent. It's a very competitive market out there.
The AI talent war.
Exactly.
But the impressive financial returns they're showing underscore the high stakes, yes, and the high costs in this race for AI dominance, but also the potential for immense financial rewards when that AI integration strategy proves successful. It reflects strong investor confidence right now in companies that show clear pathways to leveraging AI effectively for growth and user engagement.
It seems like AI is the magic word for investors right now. But while some tech companies are hitting record valuations, others are facing legal battles over, well, basic worker rights, it seems. For example, the UFCW Local 663 union, representing about 1,600 employees, has filed a class action lawsuit against Hormel, the food company in Austin, Minnesota. They're alleging the meatpacking company violated the state's Earned Sick and Safe Time law.
Right, this lawsuit highlights these ongoing labor relations and compliance issues that exist within the business sector, often running parallel to big market trends. It underscores the legal challenges companies can face regarding employee rights and workplace regulations, even amidst broader economic shifts or individual company successes. This type of legal action often signals potential systemic issues related to worker compensation, benefits, or working conditions that regulators and the public pay attention to.
It really is a roller coaster out there in the economy, isn't it? Billions being made or lost so quickly on the markets, major geopolitical trade shifts happening, and yet these fundamental dynamics of labor and worker rights are constantly in play at the same time: human interest and societal impact. From crime to culture. Okay, now let's transition to the human element, maybe some of the more unsettling undercurrents sometimes, looking at public safety and crime that impact our daily lives. In New York City, there was that shocking skyscraper shooting recently, a lone gunman who apparently assembled his weapon himself right there in the building. This raises really serious questions about, well, his mental health, obviously, but also how he obtained a security-sensitive job out in Las Vegas beforehand. What does an incident like this tell us about the challenges of urban security today, and maybe the hidden vulnerabilities in our systems?
Indeed. That incident highlights some critical vulnerabilities in urban security, doesn't it? Particularly in these high-profile, supposedly highly secure locations. The fact that the gunman could apparently assemble his weapon on site, despite having held a security-sensitive job previously, points to potential gaps. Gaps in background checks, perhaps in mental health screenings, or maybe in ongoing surveillance or monitoring for individuals in such positions. Now, it's worth noting the quick actions of a DoorDash driver who reportedly alerted authorities and is credited with saving a Blackstone employee who was in the lobby at the time. It shows how individual bravery and quick thinking can make a critical difference in these chaotic, terrifying situations. Authorities in New York are now, quite rightly, rigorously investigating how the gunman managed to breach security at one of the city's most secure skyscrapers. And that investigation will likely lead to a reevaluation of security protocols, not just there, but probably in major urban centers more broadly. There have been funerals held for a victim and a prayer service planned for an NYPD officer involved, underscoring the tragic human cost and the community's collective grief and deep concerns about safety.
It's a truly stark reminder of the challenges inherent in urban security. And speaking of challenges to safety, let's jump across the pond. In the UK, people are reportedly expressing genuine fear about even going to local shops in some areas. This is due to reported intimidation and open drug dealing right on the high street. This highlights what's being described as an endless battle against crime gangs impacting everyday life. What are the broader societal implications when people feel unsafe in their own town centers?
Well, this reflects a deeply concerning trend, doesn't it? Where criminal activities are significantly disrupting public spaces and causing widespread distress among residents and shoppers.
Yeah.
The visible presence of crime gangs engaging in intimidation, open drug dealing. It directly undermines public safety, obviously, but also that crucial sense of community, of shared space.
Right.
Economically, it can deter foot traffic, severely impact local businesses, especially small independent shops, and potentially contribute to urban decay if areas become no-go zones. It's a really complex societal problem requiring multifaceted solutions, everything from increased visible policing and community engagement efforts, right through to addressing the deeper root causes of drug addiction and gang recruitment, poverty, lack of opportunity, social exclusion. This erosion of public spaces represents a significant challenge to community well-being and the basic vitality of local economies in the UK and elsewhere where this occurs.
The sheer breadth of these kinds of crime reports, from targeted attacks to this pervasive street crime, it's a stark reminder of the challenges to public safety and the complexities facing communities everywhere today. It really puts into perspective the multifaceted nature of trying to maintain order and a sense of security in our dynamic world. Okay, maybe shifting to something a bit more within our personal control, perhaps. Health and wellness. Let's talk about something intriguing, your heart's biological age versus your chronological age. Apparently, most Americans' hearts are reportedly biologically older than their actual age. What does this really mean for us? And are there practical ways for individuals to, check this and maybe even potentially reduce their heart's biological age?
Yeah, this is a fascinating concept because it really highlights that how you live your lifestyle choices, your diet,
Exercise levels, stress management, sleep quality.
Hmm.
All of this can either accelerate or potentially decelerate the aging process of your vital organs, particularly the heart. And this can happen somewhat independently of your actual birth date.
So you could be 40, but have the heart of a 50-year-old biologically.
Exactly. Or hopefully the other way around. And yes, there are now increasingly accessible tools and methods available to get an estimate of your heart's biological age. This often involves specific blood tests that measure certain biomarkers related to inflammation, metabolic health, cellular aging,
Mm.
or sometimes through validated online calculators that factor in your lifestyle habits, your medical history, blood pressure, cholesterol levels, things like that.
Why is knowing this important?
Well, understanding this concept is really crucial for preventive health care. It empowers individuals to monitor their heart health more accurately than just going by age, and to assess their potential risks associated with this premature aging. The really good news, though, is that it's often reversible, or at least modifiable. Adopting healthier habits, things we all know, like regular physical activity, a balanced whole foods diet, managing stress effectively, getting enough sleep, not smoking, maintaining a healthy weight, all of these can indeed help reduce your heart's biological age and promote overall cardiovascular well-being, potentially extending not just your lifespan, but your health span, your years of healthy living.
That's a really great reminder for proactive preventive care focusing on health span. Meanwhile, looking at healthcare systems, the UK's National Health Service, or NHS, seems to be under perpetual severe strain. The doctors' union there has agreed to resume talks with the health secretary, Wes Streeting, but he has apparently stated very firmly that he will not negotiate on pay, following the union's recent 5-day walkout. Where does that leave things, and what's the potential long-term outlook for healthcare professionals and, ultimately, patient services there?
Well, this situation indicates a significant and worrying standstill on a really critical issue affecting healthcare services right across the UK. The health secretary's firm stance on pay means the core dispute that led to the strike remains unresolved. This could very likely lead to continued industrial action, perhaps further strikes down the line, which would inevitably put even more strain on an already struggling NHS. This ongoing conflict impacts not only doctors' morale and, crucially, retention, making it harder to keep doctors in the system, but it also directly affects patient wait times, elective surgeries, and potentially the overall quality of care. The long-term outlook is concerning because a prolonged pay dispute could easily exacerbate existing staffing shortages, increase burnout among all healthcare professionals, not just doctors, and further compromise the NHS's ability to deliver timely and effective services, putting even more pressure on a system that many feel is already stretched to its absolute limit.
And compounding those systemic pressures, there's this report that NRS Healthcare, a major UK provider of essential equipment, things like wheelchairs, hoists, hospital beds for home use, is reportedly on the brink of failure, literally running out of cash, possibly by the end of the week. What would be the immediate and long-term impact of that kind of failure for the thousands of patients who rely on these services?
This is a potentially dire situation, with immediate and severe potential impacts, yes. If NRS Healthcare, which is a firm that supplies a substantial portion of this type of essential medical equipment across the UK, actually fails, it would directly affect countless vulnerable patients.
Yeah.
People who rely on this equipment for their basic mobility, their independence, their daily care, often allowing them to stay at a hospital.
Yeah. In the short term, patients could face significant delays in receiving critical new equipment or getting essential repairs done on existing equipment. This could potentially lead to a reduced quality of life, an increased risk of falls or injury, or even unnecessary hospital admissions for conditions that could otherwise be managed safely at home. In the long term, the failure of such a major provider would further exacerbate the challenges faced by the UK's NHS and its patients. It could lead to higher costs as other, perhaps smaller providers struggle to pick up the slack, or as new, potentially lengthy procurement processes have to be initiated by local health authorities. It really highlights the fragility of the supply chain for these absolutely essential healthcare services and equipment.
That sounds like it could be truly devastating for so many people relying on that equipment daily. Okay, let's pivot now to the world of sports and culture. Starting with a somewhat controversial topic bubbling up in sports again. World Athletics has mandated a gene test for female category eligibility in elite-level events. They've set a September 1st deadline for the upcoming Tokyo Championships. Can you explain this mandate and why is it proving so controversial yet again?
Yes, this is a significant development, wading back into the very complex intersection of sports, biology, ethics, and fairness. World Athletics, which is the international governing body for track and field, is requiring chromosome testing specifically, they say, via cheek swabs or dry blood spot tests for female athletes to be eligible to compete in the female category at elite-level events like the World Championships.
Okay, and the purpose?
This policy follows a long and highly controversial history involving athletes with differences of sexual development, or DSD most famously, the South African runner Caster Semenya. The stated aim, according to World Athletics, is to ensure biological female athletes compete in the female category. They define biological female for this purpose based on having XX chromosomes and also maintaining testosterone levels within a specified range, considered typical for females.
Right.
Now, the policy apparently includes some transitional provisions for known DSD athletes who may have naturally elevated testosterone levels but meet certain criteria. However, it explicitly excludes transgender women from competing in elite female categories if they transitioned after male puberty, regardless of any hormone therapy they might have undergone. They're using the SRY gene test, which detects the sex-determining region Y gene usually found on the Y chromosome, deeming it accurate for chromosome verification with minimal risk of false results. World Athletics says it will cover part of the costs.
And the controversy.
The controversy stems from these long-running, deeply divisive debates over inclusion versus fairness, over human rights, and over the very definition of sex and gender in the context of elite sport. Critics argue these tests are discriminatory, invasive, potentially psychologically harmful, and based on flawed or overly simplistic biological criteria. Proponents, on the other hand, emphasize the need to protect the female category and maintain what they see as a level playing field for athletes born biologically female, citing average physiological differences between sexes, particularly after male puberty. It's bound to continue to be a very hot topic, touching on fundamental questions about fairness, identity, and the role of science in sport regulation.
Absolutely. That's certainly going to continue to generate debate. Okay, and finally, just a few quick cultural and entertainment snippets to round things off. The Naked Gun movie reboot starring Liam Neeson is apparently getting mixed reviews, but Neeson himself suggested it's, quote, needed in the current context. I guess maybe it is a good time for some pure slapstick humor, right?
Chuckles. Well, apparently some critics are calling it the funniest movie of the year, while others are deeming it completely unnecessary, so opinions are definitely split down the middle. Liam Neeson's comment, yeah, it adds that layer of perhaps dark humor, hinting that maybe we all just need a good, unpretentious, silly laugh, given the challenging and often pretty serious times we seem to be living through. A bit of escapism.
Maybe so. It also seems like Wednesday star Jenna Ortega is expressing surprise at her, quote, overwhelming fame from that huge Netflix series. And the Foo Fighters have revealed their new drummer in an exclusive announcement, which is big news for rock fans. And finally, there's been a final public goodbye, it seems, to the rock legend Ozzy Osbourne, touchingly dubbed the Prince of Sadness in some of Thursday's papers, marking a real cultural moment, the end of an era for many.
Yeah, these little cultural touchstones, they reflect the varied interests that captivate us, don't they? From the sometimes sudden explosion of celebrity for a young star to the enduring legacy of rock icons who've been around for decades, and even just the simple joy for fans of finding out who's got the new drum seat in a favorite band. Yeah, it's all part of the tapestry.
It is indeed. And that, my friends, brings us pretty much to the close of another deep dive.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the relentless pace of global events, haven't we? From discovering practically new continents emerging from the sea, to the surprising resilience of life in the deepest oceans, and the profound implications of advancements in space cooperation, even amidst earthly tensions.
Yeah.
We've seen that intricate web of global geopolitics play out in the ever-evolving tech landscape with AI strategies, cybersecurity threats becoming more sophisticated, and we've navigated the complexities of international trade, tariffs, and economic pressures.
And hopefully we've connected it all back to the compelling human stories that anchor everything. From those incredible acts of heroism during an earthquake, to the quiet daily struggles for public safety in our communities, and the critical issues facing healthcare systems that affect so many of us. It's been quite the expedition, hasn't it? Hopefully giving you, our listeners, a valuable shortcut to understanding some of the most important nuggets of knowledge from a really wide range of sources.
And perhaps as we continue to uncover new continents, new forms of life in the deepest oceans, and as AI technology advances at this truly breathtaking speed, maybe it raises a fundamental question for all of us. In a world of such rapid change, such deepening complexity, where do you choose to focus your curiosity for the next big discovery? Is it out there in the cosmos? Or maybe it's right here, within our own complex human systems, our societies, even ourselves.
That is definitely a question to ponder, isn't it? Where do we direct that precious curiosity? Well, we hope this deep dive has piqued your interest today and maybe encouraged you to continue your own exploration into any of the topics that particularly resonated with you. Remember, curiosity and maybe just trying to stay informed, it's the ultimate shortcut, perhaps, to navigating this complex world. Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive.